Okay everyone, so welcome again to another one of our lessons here, and in this next lesson, let's go and try to run you through on how you can go and install Git into your computer. In this case, I would want to run you through on how to install Git in Windows 10. So if you type git dash dash version, you would see that this Windows 10 machine doesn't have Git installed into it. So what we want to do here would be to go to Google search and type Git here, and then go to this website that says git-sem.com. SEM just means source code management, and you would see that Git is a free open source distributed version control system designed to handle everything from small to very large projects with speed and efficiency. It is easy to learn and has a tiny footprint with lightning fast performance. It outclasses SCM tools like Subversion, Sylvester Forced, and ClearCase with features like cheap local branching, convenient staging areas, and multiple workflows. So you would see here that there's a documentation here, the advantages of Git compared to other source control system. You also have communities here, and we also have the downloads link here from where you can go download binary releases for all major platforms. So now what I want you to do is to go to this link here, download for Windows. You will see that your download is starting. Let's just wait for this, and then let's go and save the file. Let's wait for the download to finish. So let me just pause this so at least we will not be wasting our time here. I'm just going to pause this first. Okay everyone, so the download now is done and I can open the file here, and just take note that I downloaded the 64-bit here because when we click on the download link, it redirected us and it showed us here, it actually opened and redirected us to the user agent of the browser that identifies our platform, and you would see that it automatically redirected my download to a 64-bit Windows system because my Windows system here is a 64-bit Windows. So in your case, if you're running a 32-bit, go and download this instead of the 64-bit. Now what we can do here, let me just go back to our installer here. Now we can go and try to click on it. Then let's go and click on yes here. Then you can go and read through the license here. I'm just going to click on next here. Then it will be redirecting us to the install path. So you can change this depending on your case here. But I would want to keep it in the default directory here, which is in C, program files, and then Git folder. So we do have here at least 257.9 MB of free disk space is required. And now we have some components that are shown here if ever we would want to go and install these components. So if you want to go and have additional icons on your desktop, you can go and click on this. Here we have the Windows Explorer integration, Git Bash, and Git GUI here. So let me just go and get out of my Windows virtual machine here, and let me go and click here, and you would see that I have here installed Git. I have it installed in my Windows machine, host machine, which is my main machine. And if I click on Git GUI, this is what you will be seeing. You will see that it allows us to have a graphical user interface. I can create a new repository, clone an existing repository, open an existing repository, and so on. Now, if I go and close this, and if I want to go and open Git Bash here, it will be opening a almost similar command prompt in Windows. We have here the mingw64 in Windows. So if you are more interested in using the mingw64 here as the terminal instead of the Windows console or Windows command line, this is another option for you if this is something that you will be more comfortable with. You would see here that this git bash here actually uses Linux command. So if I go and type ls, you would see here I have here my files here inside of my desktop computer. And if I use clear instead of cls, so I'm running bash terminal here. If you would, I would say that this will be running some Linux command if you're more familiar with Linux. So you can go and use this git bash terminal. Now let's go back to our virtual machine here. Let me just go and switch to full screen here, full screen mode. Okay, now let me go back here. So the git lfs or large file support extension, this is a git extension that can save us some space when we are dealing with large files. This is a open source project, and the goal of this extension is for us to be able to work more efficiently with large files and binary files in our repository. It is advisable for us to use git lfs when we have large files in our repository or we have a lot of binaries, because git lfs uses pointers instead of the actual files. So when the files or file types are marked as lfs files, when git lfs files is pulled to your local repository, the file will be sent through a filter which will replace the pointer with the actual file. So the actual files are located on the remote server, and the pulled actual files are located in a cache in your local repository. So this means that your local repository will be limited in size, but the remote repository, of course, will contain all of the actual files and differences. So Git LFS will be allowing us to handle large files more efficiently, especially if, for example, we are creating assets such as videos, audio recordings, datasets, movies, and so on, design files. So this is where LFS can be highly used, and it provides the only files that are necessary in the checkout version of our projects. So we suggest that you keep this checked, and we also want to associate our .git configuration files with the default text editor, and we also want to associate the .sh files to be run with bash. And this use a true type font in all console windows will be allowing us to go and use Unicode characters, and we can also go and apply some font styles. Here, the check daily for Git for Windows update, I won't recommend that because this will just be getting another agent running in your system, which will be using up your resources. So let's go and keep this unchecked, the two of this. Now let's go and proceed with the next here. So here we can see we can select a start menu folder where should setup place the program shortcuts. Setup will create the program shortcuts in the following start menu folder. To continue, click next. If you would like to select a different folder, click browse. Don't create a start menu folder. So let's just go and leave it at the default. And now choosing the default editor used by Git. This will be providing you some options here. We can leave it at the default, which means use Vim, the ubiquitous text editor, as Git's default editor, or you can use some of the other options here. So we have Visual Studio Code, we have Notepad++, Sublime, Atom, and so on. Just take note, there are some descriptions here that says Vim editor, while powerful, can be hard to use. Its user interface is unintuitive and its key bindings are awkward. Vim is the default editor of Git for Windows only for historical reasons, and it is highly recommended to switch to a modern graphical user interface editor instead. This will leave the core.editor option unset, which will make Git fall back to the editor environment variable. The default editor is Vim, but you may set it to some other editor of your choice. So we can just go and leave this at the default, but we also have some commands here that you can use for changing the default editor. So we do have here this command, if ever you would want to go and change it. But for now, let's just go and try to leave it at default. So just take note when you're installing new software, it's really a good practice that you go and read through the guide here, especially when you're downloading softwares that has bundle softwares, because some of those bundles can really affect your system. So let's read through this. It says here, adjusting the name of the initial branch in new repositories. What would you like Git to name the initial branch after git init? So we'll talk about Git init in succeeding lessons, what that means. So let Git decide, let Git use its default branch name, currently master for the initial branch. In newly created repositories, the Git project intends to change this default to a more inclusive name in the near future. Actually, they've already changed that to main. And here we have override the default branch name for new repositories. It says here many teams already renamed their default branches. Common choices are main, trunk, and development. Specify the name git init should use for the initial branch. This setting does not affect existing repositories. So let's just go and allow Git to decide. So let's go and click next. Now we have here adjusting your path environment. How would you like to use Git from the command line? We have three options here. You would see that use Git from Git bash only. So that means if we only want to use Git here in Git bash, such as min-gw here, and you would see this is the most cautious choice as your path will not be modified at all. You will only be able to use the Git command line tools from Git bash. And here, Git from the command line and also from third-party software, if we try to read through this option adds only some minimal Git wrappers to your path to avoid cluttering your environment with optional Unix tools. You will be able to use Git from Git bash, the command prompt, and the Windows PowerShell as well as any third-party software looking for Git in path. So if you want to go and run Git from Windows command line, you will need to choose option 2 or 3. So option 2 here will be limiting the Git command line tools to a subset that does not conflict with built-in Windows command line tools. If you ever have any existing Windows batch files that you run that might conflict with the Git command line, don't choose the third option. Okay? On the other hand, if you don't have such a conflict and you like a more Linux-style Windows command line prompt, choose the third option. Because if we try to look at the third option here, use Git and optional Unix tools from the command prompt. Both Git and the optional Unix tools will be added to your path. This will override Windows tools like find and sort. Only use this option if you understand the implications. So the most safest and one of the most recommended here option will be the second option here, which is to use Git from command line and also from a third-party software. So let's go and choose that. So here we have choosing HTTPS transport backend, which SSL or TLS library would you like Git to use for HTTPS connections. Use the OpenSSL library. Server certificates will be validated using the CA bundle.crt file, or use the native Windows Secure Channel library. Server certificates will be validated using Windows Certificate Stores. This option also allows you to use your company's internal root CA certificates distributed via Active Directory domain services. So if you're running a Windows Enterprise Network, you will need to be able to use the Windows Certificate Store. Like you needing to have root certs that you need to use, you will need to choose the second option. If ever you would want to go and change the option that you've made here, you can actually use some commands such as git config global http ssl backend channel, or you can use the OpenSSL option here. So if ever you would want to go and shift from one option to another option, you can use this git commands here. Okay, so let's just leave it at the default here right now. So let's go and click next. Now we have here configuring the line ending conversions. How should Git treat line endings in text files? So for this option, you just need to verify here which operating system do you like using on your end. So we see here check out Windows style and commit Unix style line endings. Here we have check out as is, commit Unix style line endings, and check out as is, commit as is. So here for the first option, Git will convert line feeds to CRLF when checking out text files. When committing text files, CRLF will be converted to line feeds. For cross-platform projects, this is the recommended settings on Windows, and the core.auto CRLF is set to true, the value for this core.auto CRLF command. So for Windows, this is our best option as recommended here, and in Linux or Unix machines, we use the second option. This is the recommended setting on Unix. And the third option will not be recommended for cross-platform projects because sometimes we will be working in a cross-platform development team. Some of your members might be using Linux machines. Some of them might be using Windows machines. So this is why we have these options here. Your selection here will depend largely on how you would like to work. If you work a lot in Linux, so if you want your Git windows to check out Windows style but commit Unix style, at least you won't need to change anything else anymore when you're working in the Linux machine. When you check out and you use this option here. So let's go and try to use this option and click next. Now we have here configuring the terminal emulator to use with Git Bash. Which terminal emulator do you want to use with your Git Bash? So in this case, let's go stick with use Minty here. This is what is recommended unless you really have a reason for you to use a default console window in Windows. I would suggest that you use the use Minty here. Minty is lightweight and more configurable than the Windows console. That's why we should select this option here. Now we have here choose the default behavior of git pull. What should git pull do by default? Default is fast forward or merge. So let's just go with the default option here and then click next. Here we have the credential helper, which credential helper should be configured. So we can see here Git Credential Manager Core, which is the newer version, which is a cross-platform version of the Git Credential Manager. See more information about the feature of Git Credential Manager here. You can actually click on this option for you to do some more reading. And here, this is the deprecated version. So of course, we would want to go for the newer version. Then this is actually something that you can go and allow you to apply multi-factor authentication. So if you go and click on the option here, it will redirect you to a repository in GitHub. You would see here. And there are some frequently asked questions here, authentication problems. So I would suggest that you try to read through this so at least you'll have some idea with regards to the Git Credential Manager. So let's just close this and let's stick to the default option here and then click next. Now we have here configuring extra options. Which features would you like to enable? So it says here this provides a significant performance boost. So let's just keep that checked. Here we have enable symbolic links, and symbolic links, if you try to read more, you want to read more about it, we can click on that. So short version, there's no exact equivalent for POSIX symlinks on Windows, and the closest thing is unavailable for non-admins by default. Therefore, emulation support is switched off by default and needs to be configured by you, the user, via the core symlinks assigned the true value here config setting. So this will be useful for cross-platform development. So if ever you will be working in a cross-platform development, you can check this. But for now, I want to leave that blank and then click next. Here we have configuring experimental options, which bleeding edge features would you like to enable. Enable experimental support for sudo consoles. This is new. This allows running native console programs like Node or Python in a Git Bash window without using WinPty, but it still has known bugs. So I don't want to enable this. So let's just go and try to proceed in installing our Git here or Git into our computer. So let's just go and wait for it to install. I'm just going to pause the video first until it's done and finished, so at least we can go and save some time. Okay guys, so we can see here it's already done. Let's just wait for it to finalize. And let's just click finish here. Now let's try to go and open our command prompt. And let's go and try to check the Git version if it's already installed. And congratulations everyone, we have now installed Git into our local machine here. So we can see here it's the version 2.29.2 Windows 2 here. And if we try to go here, we can see that we have Git bash. We also have Git GUI here. Let's see what's the GUI, how it looks in our machine here right now. So same with my host machine, our guest machine now. In my case, in my virtual machine, I now have Git installed in my Windows operating system. So that will be all for this lesson, and I hope that you learned a lot in this session. So thank you and see you on our next lessons.